Don't mind me, I'm just rocking out to the new intro. Hope you guys liked it. I would love to hear your feedback. I've been playing around with my audio-visual skills, my video editing skills, so definitely throw this video a like. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the new lead-in. I would love to hear your feedback. Also, while you're there, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet this. Let's get this out there to anyone that would like to hear it or needs to hear it for that matter. So, my name is Matthew Struck. This is Why Libertarian, your weekly dose of liberty. Tonight, we're talking about a really interesting topic, or I find it interesting. I hope you guys are going to find it interesting too. The topic really relates to something we've been talking a lot about, and it's not just recently, right? People are talking about secession, people are talking about voting, people are talking about whether or not DC should be as powerful it is. The one thing it really boils down to me, the piece that it really boils down to is whether or not we're represented, right? We don't have a democracy, right? Anyone who tells you, and a ton of people, like when Trump's people storm the Capitol, oh, it's a threat to our democracy. We don't have a democracy, okay? We have a democracy within the states. If they storm the state house buildings, the capitals, that would have been a threat to our democracy. But each one of our states practices democracy. We have a representative republic. What does that mean? It means that when we fought the Revolutionary War, a bunch of dudes, mostly dudes, some women, but mostly dudes, were like, hey, we don't feel represented in England. The monarch, King George, basically does whatever the hell he wants, and we don't feel like we have a voice. Or when we do send letters and things like that, he just flat out ignores us because he could not give two craps, right? We are not represented. And the catchphrase was, what? No taxation without representation. Well, that would mean that in this representative republic that we have right now, feeling represented is probably really freaking important. No? That being said, I am taking live questions and comments. So if you have questions and comments as I'm rolling, let them rip and I will throw them on. I'm having mic issues here. So you're going to feel like you're getting crapped on. If you don't feel represented in Washington, D.C., or at the State House, or even at the county, all right? Now, how do we even begin looking at this? Well, the one thing I wanted to look at was the congressional district, right? The House of Representatives. Representative is literally a word in the title, okay? The word representative is in the title. It is basically a ton of people that are sent to Washington, D.C. to represent us and fight for us, fight for our way of life, fight for hopefully stopping the people in D.C. from overrunning our freedoms and our liberties. Well, are they representative? Well, let's find out. I want to look at New Jersey's 11th district. This is my home district. This is a good portion of it is Morris County, but interestingly enough, New Jersey's 11th district, and it actually doesn't look like one of the abomination redistricted districts that are out there, right? Like, doesn't make any major like left or right turns. There's no huge like peninsula of land shooting off into nowhere. It actually looks like a fairly well-formed district. So I would hope that the congressional representative from this district is actually representative of the people in the district. Well, let's look at it. The 11th district right now, 733,000 people. So that means one person goes to Washington, D.C. to represent 733,000 people. Now, before I even go a step further, just think about if you had to be nominated. We just came out of the holidays and everything like that. You had like a bunch of family, or if you were afraid of COVID, you didn't, but in past years you have. You have a bunch of family sitting around the holiday table. If you were picked to represent them, do you think you would accurately represent all of the people at that table, right? The 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 people that you have around for the holidays that you're literally related to? Our representative has to represent 733,000 people. So, all right. Maybe if those 733,000 people look really similar to each other, right? Maybe they're all kind of similar, not just look, but also culture, language, socioeconomic circumstance. Like if all of those things are very homogeneous, we'll have a representative that represents us well. So let's look at the demographics. It's like 82% white, right? Which includes, in the census data, includes white and Hispanic or Latino, okay? Of the overall population, a little over 10% is Asian American. Of the total population, they actually break out. 10% is Hispanic and Latino, a little over 2% Puerto Rican, a little over 1% Mexican, 3.25% Black. Within this district. The median household income, this will be interesting. In the comments, let me know how you feel about this. The median household income within this district, the 11th district in New Jersey, is $108,000 a year. You heard me right, $108,000. We are not a poor district. In fact, we have some of the highest priced zip codes in the entire country in the 11th district. Top jobs, white collar, professionals, healthcare, and a lot of retail. This district actually represents 4 counties. Now, I actually wanted to go further down on this, and I'll give you a couple other examples, but I'm sticking with the congressional district. But my theory, I believe, holds true even on the county level. I think on the county level, there's also a huge breakdown in representation, but we'll get to that one. All right. So that's the 11th district. So who is the representative from the 11th district? Well, let me pull up the correct tab so I can show you who it is. This is Mikey Sherrill. I've met Mikey Sherrill in person. Mikey is an absolutely fantastic person. If you could take a cookie cutter, right? Develop a cookie cutter of what a United States congressional representative looks like, okay? It would probably spit out Mikey Sherrill, all right? Mikey is, like I said, a great person. We're not even talking about politics today. I'm not talking about politics. I'm not talking about the policies or anything like that of Mikey. What I'm talking about is whether or not I feel like you can have a representative from a very diverse population, all right? Well, let's look at Mikey. Mikey is 49 today. Happy birthday, Mikey. Sorry, I'm putting you on blast on your birthday, but happy 49th. Enjoy it before you hit the big 5-0. She's a white female, U.S. Navy helicopter pilot, an attorney, and a former federal prosecutor. She got her Bachelor's of Science from Annapolis. She has a Master's in Economic History from the London School of Economics, and she has a JD from Georgetown University. She's also a mother of 4 and lives in Montclair in New Jersey, which is important because the next step that I want to take here is I want to take 2 towns and compare them within the district, all right? And I'm not even going to take, like, say, one from one county and one from another, because remember, there's 4 counties represented here. And I can tell you, as someone who knows North Jersey, I know that all 4 counties have a little bit of a different culture and feel to them, okay? So I'm actually going to look at a bunch, or actually 2 towns that are within Mikey's own home county. So she lives in Montclair. She's in Essex County. The 2 towns I'm going to look at are Essex Fells and Bloomfield. All right. Now, these 2 are, I think you're going to see pretty significantly different. Okay. But I'll leave it up to you to determine whether or not you feel that that's the case. All right. So Essex Fells is 80% college educated. You heard that right. 80% of Essex Fells is college educated. Now, it's small. It only has about 2,100 people in Essex Fells, 95% white and Latino, and actually the majority of that 95% is white because I think the Latino portion of the population is just about 2%. And then 1% is Black Americans that live within Essex Fells. The median household income, now remember, this is juxtaposed to $108,000 a year. The median household income in Essex Fells is almost $203,000 a year. That is 87% higher than the median in the entire congressional district. 87% higher. It's almost double, all right? 1% of folks live below the poverty line. I actually think that's pretty generous. It might even include, 18-year-olds and stuff like that that maybe have been emancipated for certain financial aid reasons. But 1% of the folks within Essex Fells live below the poverty line. All right, so that's Essex Fells. Essex Fells, I obviously chose it because it is a stark contrast to our other competitor here. Our other competitor is Bloomfield, or other comparative municipality. Bloomfield, also in Essex County, is larger. It's more, I wouldn't call it urban, but it's definitely more densely populated. 47,000 people. Only 40% are college educated. Now remember, in Essex Fells, 80% versus 40%. And in fact, if I dig even deeper, the contrast is even worse, because those 80% of people that are college educated in Essex Fells, a lot of them have masters, PhDs. The folks in Bloomfield, the majority of them just have an undergraduate degree, but 40%, all right? 60% are white and Latino, meaning this is different. Obviously, the United States is still majority white Caucasian, but this is much less so than Essex Fells, obviously. There is a much larger black population, 18.5%. Of the population in Bloomfield is black. And so I have Matt's actually asking for my citations here. There's a couple of different ones that I drew from. If I couldn't find a recent statistics, I was pulling from the 2010 census. I didn't pull from the most recent census because I didn't have that information available to me. There were a couple of other websites that offer like statistical data, some of which was Wikipedia, so I didn't want to defer to Wikipedia if I didn't have a credible, primary source. There's also a couple other ones called, I believe, datastat.io that pulls from other types of data banks that are publicly available. But so that's really where I pulled that information from. All right, and I'll show you a couple more of the website or one particular when I talk about senators and whether they're representative. But so, again, 60% white Latino, 18.5% black, 24.5% Hispanic. So a much more diverse population. Or I wouldn't necessarily say much more diverse. I would say much more mixed in terms of the dynamic between folks that identify as white and Caucasian versus those other cultural heritages. Median household income. This is interesting, all right? Median household income, $77,900. Still pretty decent in terms of, I think the average household income in the United States is somewhere in the low 50s, right? I could be off on that one. I apologize, Matt. I didn't fact check that one, but I think that's about right. But as far as the median in the congressional district, that's actually 28% below the median income. Now, anyone who's ever driven through New Jersey, lived in New Jersey, bought a cup of coffee or had some gas in New Jersey, or God forbid a pack of cigarettes, you know that the cost of living in New Jersey is also some of the highest in the country. So that also contributes to the fact that, these household incomes are higher, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're, living in the lap of luxury, so to speak. And 7.4% of the people in Bloomfield live at or below the poverty line, right? A very stark contrast. So there's two ways that I can look at this, all right? I can look at it from the perspective of, does the representative represent the individuals within the population, all right? Which, again, 733,000 individuals are represented by one person in D.C., or at the very least one person in that elected body. The other way that I can look at it is, who is voting for that representative, and whether or not they're putting a representative that is going to understand and vote for the peoples of the congressional district, all right? So there's two different angles that I can take here. The one thing I'm going to do first is I have a pet project that I'm starting, so I'm just going to give you a little snippet, little sneak peek at that project, and I will be right back for the comparison. There are so many reasons to decentralize, whether it's lack of control over your own data, platforms where you are the product and get paid little to no money, or censorship and government oversight into your personal communications. That's why I'm taking a journey to decentralize my social media as well as my life. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out the Decentralize Everything playlist on this channel. Whether you're curious or looking to decentralize too, I would love your company as I make a move to break free, take control, and decentralize everything. So yeah, that's a little project that I'm working on. Actually, it's a little bit more than a little project. It's a pretty big project. It is a standalone playlist on the YouTube channel. And again, I will be going through, the first thing I'm going to be looking at is decentralizing my social media and moving, or at least not moving, but also creating a presence on the blockchain along with standard media channels and kind of bringing you along on that process. So you're welcome to follow along on that. In fact, next week, I think I've confirmed the basically the developer for one of the apps that's built on the Hive blockchain, an app by the name of 3Speak. It's essentially the YouTube analog on blockchain, will be here. So I get to interview Dan, who is the head dev for that. So I'm super excited. All right, so to bring you back into the conversation, we've been talking about these two municipalities that are starkly different within the 11th Congressional District, and the fact that Mikey Sherrill is essentially responsible for representing the peoples of those two municipalities. Well, first of all, I find it very difficult to think that Mikey is going to speak for the average Black or Hispanic or Latino resident within Bloomfield, okay? You're talking about an extremely well-educated person, someone who's been through 3 levels of post-secondary education, lives in a very nice place. And again, I'm not demonizing her for her success or her I'm not talking political, leanings here. What I'm talking about is whether or not her background could legitimately allow her to represent the peoples of, say, Bloomfield, right? Now, I can actually flip it the other way, too. So someone of Mikey's background may also not be very representative of the people who live in Essex Fells either, right? $202,000 in average annual household income in Essex Fells. That is, and Mikey lives in Montclair. Montclair is a very nice and certain areas are well-to-do, but Essex Fells, again, is one of the highest income zip codes in the entire country, all right? So Mikey might not even represent that group of Americans within her congressional district either. So I'm really skeptical as to whether or not one person can represent almost 750,000 people, of which inside of that district there are 2 starkly contrasting municipalities. And believe me, I can take this out to the bitter end, right? I'm probably preaching to the choir if I'm talking to libertarians and ANCAPs and anarchists that watch this. The smallest minority is 1, right? Like the individual, and every single individual is unique. So how could you possibly condescend to represent almost 750,000 people with rules and regulations and policies and spending bills that you're putting forward from Washington, D.C. and essentially dictating down to your home district in New Jersey? I find it very hard to believe that. The other angle that you can take from it here is there are people within Essex Fells that vote for Mikey. And they're basically voting for a representative that maybe they feel like represents them. Well, if they're voting for Mikey who represents them, does that mean that it's at the expense of the other people in the district that maybe Mikey isn't as representative of? While some of the people in Bloomfield are probably well represented by Mikey in DC, I would make the point that there's probably a lot of people in Bloomfield or elsewhere in the district that do not feel represented. In fact, Morris County, which is in the district, is very much a red county. Okay, now this is the first time this congressional district has gone Democrat in the last midterm election in a very long time. I think it was 30 years. So there's been a flip here in terms of which way the congressional district voted. But that being said, there's still a huge portion of folks who would consider themselves Republican or conservative or whatever label you want to throw on it, not Democrat. Okay. And that's a complete, it's a good example of how an individual who's supposed to represent such a large swath of people couldn't possibly be well representative of that overall population. All right. And if you think about it, say the white business owning male in Essex County that voted for Mikey is voting for Mikey, and those policies are being subjected upon someone, and maybe the white business owning male didn't vote for Mikey, right? But the policies that result from Mikey going to DC end up affecting both of those groups, right? Or at the very least, it ends up affecting some of them because those policies may have outs or loopholes or other things that are placed in there that wealthier member of Essex Fells might be able to leverage in their favor. Meaning you have people that are from completely disparate backgrounds voting for a representative that might put through regulation, laws, and all kinds of other things that will affect the other group. That's not representative, and that's within one congressional district. Now let's just take congressional districts and look at them, right? Look at a high-income district like the 11th in New Jersey and look at, a district in Compton. Are those representative? If you have, now granted, that's what representative government is supposed to be, where you're sending your representative to speak for you and speak for your, what you wish the government did or didn't do, right? But that being said, that is a stark contrast between those two. For me, the take home is that the higher up that you go in government, right, the more individuals that a representative has to represent. And I actually think that they do a worse and worse and worse job the higher up that you go, because the population they're supposed to represent becomes so much more diverse, and it happens really quickly. When you go from just the municipal level to the county level, it gets really diverse really quickly. Another good example of this is if I take, say, the senators from New Jersey. Now, granted, senators are a little bit different. So senators aren't necessarily supposed to, quote unquote, represent the people of New Jersey, but they're still voting on legislation, rules, and regulations that affect people in their home state. So I should hope that at least a secondary leaning of these people is that they want to represent the people of New Jersey in an accurate way, right? Well, so let's look at a comparison between Essex Fells and, interestingly enough, on this website, this is datausa.io. It's essentially a geographic and demographic profiling website. Datausa.io. We're looking at Essex Fells and Newark. They did not have Bloomfield available, but again, two starkly contrasting municipalities within the same county, okay? Within the same county. And this looks at, okay, our two senators, U.S. senators, are Bob Menendez and Cory Booker, all right? Interestingly enough, Bob Menendez and Cory Booker both represent the entire state of New Jersey, meaning from North Jersey and Bergen and Union and Passaic County and Morris County all the way down to Camden, Atlantic County, counties in South Jersey that look nothing demographically or socio like North Jersey. Both of them come from North Jersey. So I find it really difficult, even as much as they travel or as much as they go to those places, that they are going to be able to accurately represent the people of South Jersey if they are the two U.S. senators representative of the state, and both of them come from very urban or densely populated areas from North Jersey. But just look at the difference between these two towns, okay? You have Essex Fells, which essentially has a very low poverty rate, low population, huge median household income. The median household value of a house in Essex Fells is $826,000. All right. And the median age is 46, so it's a little bit older. All right. Now, juxtapose that to Newark. Newark has obviously a much larger population. It's the city that Cory Booker was the mayor of, so this is also kind of hits home a little bit. 28% poverty rate. I'm like, that is a stark contrast. There is a huge difference in median household income. Same county. county. So I could look at the county freeholders, right, and also draw this comparison and say, do county freeholders accurately represent these groups? Now, interestingly enough, the same county freeholder does not represent Essex Fells or Newark, but guess what? The decisions that come out of the county freeholder, out of the county freeholders, it affects both of them. Okay, and you have to then negotiate one way or the other in order to push or pull in the direction that helps you out the most. All right, median household income way lower, median property value less than a third. Okay, much bigger employee base, and actually a younger age. I believe I didn't pull up the life expectancy statistics either, but I think there's also a stark contrast there as well, as you would expect between a fairly wealthy municipality and one that has a much lower average household income. So from that perspective, in my point of view, the higher up that you go in the hierarchy of politicians and governance in this country, the further away, more removed these representatives are from accurately representing the populations that they're supposed to, right? Their socioeconomic circumstances are dramatically different. Not to mention the fact that say you come from a poor district and you represent a poor district, a lot of those elected officials end up going to Washington, D.C., and their socioeconomic circumstances look drastically different than when they first went to Washington, D.C. in order to represent those populations. So from that standpoint, the only answer for me, and again, this is my perspective, we're not talking about any specific political policy or anything like that. My answer, or the conclusion that I draw, is that the higher up that you go, the less impactful those decisions should be. Like dramatically less impactful. The most impactful and probably the ones that have the highest likelihood of being good, which I would say is also arguable, but the ones that have the most likelihood of being positive for the people and representative of the people are decisions that are made on the municipal level, right? Even within a municipality, there's stark differences in terms of the people that live there. But that being said, you can go to town hall. You can complain to the mayor. You can complain to the council and actually have their ear. You can go to a meeting. The higher up you go, state capitol, or even DC, can I go to Trenton every single week in order to advocate from my perspective or give feedback to my representative? You know, I've met Mikey twice. Both of them were at campaign events. I can't get her on the phone. You know who gets her on the phone? The donors that are given specific access. And you know what? To a certain extent, I don't blame her because we allowed the game to get there, right? Like, that's the game now. You can't spend a ton of time with every single voter that maybe threw you $20 or didn't throw you any money, right? You have to spend as much of your time fundraising as possible. And that's another topic for another day in terms of whether these folks are representative because of the allocation of time that they're putting towards, actually understanding what is needed by the district and actually executing on what's being asked of them, okay? But simply from a background, from just a clear difference, a stark difference in the circumstances of people within these folks' districts means the higher up the food chain you go, these people should not be making decisions that impact your life that much. They just shouldn't, because of how awful it can be. Like, if you're the chosen handful of people that a policy or a regulation or a bill is going to help or reach out to or provide some resources to, good for you. You lucked out. You hit the freaking lottery, right? The people, everyone else that is subjected to that, but that bill wasn't basically having their representation in mind, they're screwed. They're screwed. And it's because those people represent such a vast swath of Americans, there is no possible way that they could ever balance all of those competing interests, all of those balls that they would have to juggle to make sure that the people in Essex Fells were taken care of and the people of Bloomfield and the people in Morristown, all of those people that have to be represented, there's no possible way that one individual could possibly represent them. And we find ourselves in a world where more and more we become reliant on decisions from Washington, D.C. They overreach. I mean, hell, the executive orders that come out of the Oval Office are an abomination. You have the executive office, basically, the head executive of the United States, basically pulling an end around on the legislature and not even giving them full discretion in terms of declaring war, not even giving them full discretion, what they're supposed to have in terms of the purse strings and passing the budget and what money gets spent where. We just declare an emergency and spend money. We'll find it later, right? But all of that comes to a head when you look at policies that have been maybe helpful to a small group of people and then disastrous for everyone else. Okay? And I wish I didn't have to keep hearkening back to it, but things like the subprime crisis are a perfect example. Policies and bills and deregulation that was supposed to help a small subset of the population, and it ballooned exponentially and ended up destroying our financial system, or actually working into the hands of the financial system that folks that love to print money and borrow money would actually prefer. But that being said, that was disastrous for middle income families. It was disastrous. If you had a home that you had to borrow against for college or something like that, and all of a sudden the total value of the house tanked, and they called in the line of credit or restricted it, you were hosed. There was no way you were going to be able to make up that. And that wasn't from you, like errantly buying a house on 0% interest in this freaky 3-year ARM or whatever, right? That was just from you making a decision to try and get your child to college, borrowing against an asset you had, and then Wall Street in conjunction with the feds just basically smoked trillions of dollars of value, and most of it came out of the home equity of Americans, especially if they ended up dumping or selling at a loss. But that just goes to show you that the representative nature of government gets worse as you go higher up the food chain. The folks at the State House, they don't represent you. The folks in D.C., they most certainly don't represent you. And I could actually make an argument that the folks that are at the county building don't really accurately represent you. The closest bet, the best chance that you have for someone who's representative of you is the person that lives down the block from you and they go to town hall. They have a short commute. When they vote on things or when they come up with different ordinances that they want to pass, you could actually go talk to them and have an audience. The folks that are so far away from you, literally hundreds or thousands of miles away from you, are not representative of you when they go to D.C. And they're not representative of you for a multitude of reasons. And the most important thing from this is that the votes that people are making are also like oppressive votes sometimes. Or not oppressive, but they're made in defense, right? And that defensive vote, I mean, we had something that happened on Twitter in the last couple of days where folks were, clamoring about whether or not ANCAPs should vote, right? And people that consider themselves hardcore ANCAPs say, no, you displace yourself from the system because when you vote, you're an aggressor. Well, there's also a self-defense mechanism that's involved in voting now. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be if you didn't vote, things weren't that impactful for you. But now it's almost like you feel like you're compelled to vote because you are under attack from the state. The state is aggressing against you, and you feel like that you have to vote in order to stop that from happening. And that is not something that should be the case. It shouldn't be that crucial. It should be more crucial that you vote locally than at the federal or the state level. It should be more crucial how your taxes are spent on the local level than on the federal level. And your tax rate should not be mostly going to D.C. It should not be mostly going to the State House. It should be going to the town hall, if at anything. And if I had my druthers, it would be voluntary. They would have to show you value to warrant you paying your taxes to town hall. And if you didn't, and if you opted out, they wouldn't be able to come and take your property with a gun. But that's not the system we have now. It's all compulsory. There's no opt-out. There's no opt-out. And there's no opt-in either. It's you do it, or we have someone show up with a gun. And the reason why that is, the reason why the state has to use basically violence to extract its money and your compliance, is because otherwise, if it was optional, you wouldn't do it. You would not choose to electively give these folks that are not representative of you money or say over your life. You just wouldn't. And the numbers win out here. The numbers win out. I got my brother trolling the live cast coming in from Georgia. Would you claim that the find it laterisms are so common nowadays that most legislative efforts are beyond repair? I would say most legislative efforts are done not based off of principle. They're not even done based off of some level of wisdom. They're done based off of PR and marketing. It's let's see what sells well and then figure out how to fund it later, right? It's like the prescription plan that got added to Medicare, right? This is, again, understanding, I'm not right or left, okay? When Bush W puts through an unfunded expansion of Medicare, right? The same exact thing is true. There's no thought process as to whether or not it's going to remain solvent, whether it's going to wreck us. There's no thought. The only thought process is how do we justify it so that we can sell it to the American people. And if it sells, then we get to pin a medal on our chest and say, see, we helped you, right? What about all the people that weren't older and weren't going to be able to take part in the program? What happens if it's insolvent? Are the representatives that voted for that representative of the young that won't get to take part in that program, that will essentially have to pay off the IOU over generations, that those people were represented accurately? That's another indication, is the overall age, the average age of people within the legislature and at the federal level. Those folks are older, right? And again, it's not an indictment against old people, but it's an indictment against whether or not you think an older person can accurately reflect the desires and hopefully protect the rights and the livelihoods and the lifestyle of people within a certain district within the United States. If you're 80, do you see eye to eye with a 21-year-old or an 18-year-old who's voting? And are you making decisions that are good for them, knowing full well that you'll probably be dead by the time that those negative consequences end up impacting that member of your constituency? It's really difficult for me to see any justification that someone in the House of Representatives, that a federal U.S. senator, that the president is representative of me, that they represent me and my interests and my specific interests in life, liberty, freedom, autonomy, and the ability to live my life without the state interfering. But every single day it's there. Every single day I'm aggressed upon. And I'm lucky. Like, most people would say that I'm speaking from a place of privilege, and I am. I'm lucky. I have a good job. I own a business that's doing well. COVID didn't impact me that much. I'm extremely lucky. And yet, even then, I'm not represented. Now think about the person that lost their job, or lost their business, or lost their benefits, right? Or someone who, like the 18-year-old or the 16-year-old, or my kids who still aren't even in their teens. Are they represented by the decisions that we've made to, fix or combat COVID that they'll have to pay for? $27 trillion doesn't get paid overnight. It just doesn't. In fact, I think people need to start understanding and waking up to the fact that it just doesn't. Ever doesn't get paid. And the folks that are supposedly representative of us in D.C. wrote those checks. And they've been writing them for decades. And I would make the argument that they are not representative of us for decades. Because what drives them, what the impetus for their decision making is not us. It's not. So at the end of the day, if I could wave a magic wand and make the United States look the way I wanted it, as from a governance standpoint, we wouldn't need DC. We wouldn't have state houses and these sacred capitals that have marble steps and statues and busts all over the place. We would have municipal town halls. We would have local conversations. We would have collaborations amongst municipalities where they actually had to talk with each other and negotiate shared services, which, by the way, they do now. Anyone who wants to say, oh, they're going to poo-poo this idea, oh, they could never do that. The complexity of what the U.S. government does is too complex. Municipalities couldn't do it. Bullshit. One, because the U.S. government does too much and they overreach, so most of it they shouldn't be doing in the first place. Two, the things that might actually be kind of worthwhile, okay, can easily be done through technology. Facebook was used to overthrow the Egyptian government. The Arab summer or the Arab Spring happened because of social media. A bunch of municipalities could get together to, collaborate on garbage collection. All right? Or even collaborate to make sure that the National Guard is well taken care of and prepared in case there's an issue. So I want to thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone who watched live, thank you. If you're a returning watcher, thank you so much. I appreciate you returning. First time, welcome. And if you watch on the recorded version, I want to appreciate you as well and say thank you. Please feel free to share your comments, questions. Again, I will get back to you even after this live cast is over. Every week we are here. We're a little bit late this week. Usually it's every single week at Tuesday at 5 p.m. So look for that. Make sure to subscribe, like, definitely hit the notification bell and share it or retweet it so that we can get the message out there and share it with as many people as possible. So I want to say thank you. Have a very good evening, and definitely look out for that interview next week that I have with the developer for 3Speak, and also look out for more videos coming out on the Decentralize Everything playlist. Thank you, Liberty lovers. I appreciate it.